Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory Old World video. In today's episode, I want to talk about a bit of a controversy that has built up around the Old World regarding the so-called legacy factions. For those of you that are a little bit out of the loop, the Old World has launched with two kinds of faction. We've got the core factions, which includes the Empire of Man, the Dwarves, Warriors of Chaos, and then we've got some legacy factions, which include Skaven, Vampire Counts, Ogre Kingdoms, and some others. In total, there are 9 core factions, and there are 7 legacy factions. The difference between these two types of faction comes down to what level of support they are going to receive and how prevalent they are in the old world right now. You see, there is an established timeline for Warhammer Fantasy, and the core factions represent those that are very active right now in the world, whereas the legacy ones represent those factions which maybe are a little bit more in the shadows. They're a bit on the back burner. For example, the Skaven are currently undergoing a huge civil war where they're all just eating each other, but that means that really they're just sticking to the Under Empire. There's a lot going on in the Under Empire, but it's not really boiling out onto the surface. This was actually the point in history where the Skaven disappeared for an extended amount of time, and so they faded into myth and legend. So if you're familiar with Old World and you're wondering why do people not believe that the Skaven exist, well, this period of time is what caused it, because they just faded from everything. No one saw them. People just assumed that they were a story to frighten children with. That's all well and good for a historical in-game point of view, but it's not much comfort. It's a little worrying to those people that were interested in the legacy factions. Whether you are someone who's getting into Old World for the first time and you're like, I really like the idea of a huge horde of zombies, so I want to go Vampire Counts, or I really want to get my hands on some of those Lizard Men. The new sci-fi models would be great to make a Lizard Men army with. Or perhaps you're someone who's had that faction for a long time. Maybe you're a veteran player and you're looking forward to getting back into the old world. You weren't tempted over to Age of Sigmar. You didn't care about Warhammer 40k. You were a Vampire Count player through and through, and you are finally ready to dust off your models, raise the zombies from their tombs, and get back into the fight. Either way, it doesn't feel great when you're told that your faction is not going to be the focus of the game. But to be fair, Games Workshop were pretty upfront about this, and from the very beginning of them talking about the old world and starting to release lots of hype and content around it for over a year now, they've been upfront and said, look, we've got legacy factions, we've got core factions. And whilst there's some players that have been worried about it, the promise from Games Workshop was these models will be usable. You'll be able to play all of your old armies. You might not be the focus of the story, but you're going to be playable, usable. Nothing's going to stop you from getting your army that you like and using it on the tabletop. So the big question is, what's the controversy all about? Why are you hearing some people say that legacy factions are completely dead? Why are you hearing that some people are saying that they're no longer going to get to the old world, that the old world is dead on launch because of these legacy factions? That's some of the serious stuff that is being thrown around the internet right now. Well, the day before the pre-order went live, almost like a silver bullet into the hype train, GW released a statement on Warhammer Community as part of a big article saying that legacy factions are going to receive a free rules PDF, but that's about it. You're going to get your PDF, but it's not going to get updated and after launch, and you're not going to get any model support. And then they went, in my opinion, a step way too far, and they said, and they are not going to be legal for tournaments. The reaction to this statement was palpable. The internet exploded with doom and gloom, and many people were saying that this was a stupid decision, They're cutting out a couple of the biggest factions. Skaven vampires have got huge followings, were very, very common, very popular back in the day. And you've got lizardmen armies as well. There was a lot of very large communities that felt like they had just had the rug pulled out from underneath them. And a lot of people who had started getting into those factions preemptively, suddenly finding that the brakes, the emergency brakes, had been applied to their hype train. That all sounds pretty bad, and if you're a prospective legacy faction player or a current one returning, you might think that, well, you're not allowed to play the old world. You can't get involved. You've been shut out. Well, never fear, for Mordian Glory is here, and I'm going to tell you something. Don't panic, because in all honesty, it gets down to brass tacks, we get down to reality. That statement, that thing that GW put out is complete and utter bullshit. I want to dispel any illusion, any misunderstanding that may have crept into the community with this thing that GW has put out. I want to turn your frown upside down. I want to put more coal into the boiler of your hype train. I want to get you so giddy with excitement for Old World again that you can't sit down and you can't help but involuntarily grin from ear to ear. Because all of the legacy factions, every man jack of them, is totally fine, totally safe, and totally usable in the old world. And this thing that GW's put out, this supposed statement, it's just genuinely not going to affect you. Let's address these points one at a time. And the first one being the issue with no new model support. Oh no, I won't be able to use any of my models. Oh, that GW's not going to produce any models for these factions. Oh wait, no, that's not true. Because if anything, the legacy factions are going to have better models than the core factions. I know that sounds crazy. How is GW going to give them better models? That would imply that they're going to be better supported. No, what? But they just said no support. What? Wait, don't worry. The vast majority of legacy factions, like your vampire counts and your lizardmen, for example, have got complete, fully intact ranges over in Age of Sigmar. In fact, if anything, especially when it comes to the vampire counts, your models have benefited from almost a decade of GW innovation and improvements in model design. Go and look at the Death Rattle skeletons, all right? Look at all of the fine, incredible detail that's been put into those models. And then go and look at the Tomb Kings of Khemri skeleton warriors with their giant monkey fists and just crazy bow-legged squatty, look like they're having a poo pose, all right? And you tell me which faction's getting the better model support. It's the same thing with lizardmen. Take a look at the new Seraphon models. Gorgeous. Seraphon are one of the few factions which have tempted me into Sigmar, because I might not like the lore behind them, but my god, those new Swords Warriors give me an uncomfortable feeling in my trousers. But what about Skaven? Possibly one of the most anticipated factions in the old world, the focus of so many games like Vermintide, and incredibly popular in games like Warhammer Total War as well. You can go and find all sorts of wacky, I beat Total War Warhammer just using rattling gun videos and all that kind of stuff. Skaven are just next level, but they've not got any new Age of Sigmar models. No, but their entire Warhammer Fantasy range, literally as it was from 8 years ago, is still perfectly intact and sold right now, brand new in box by Games Workshop. If you are someone who's like, I like the old models, I don't want these newfangled ones, give me the crazy proportions, that's what I want the member berries injected into my veins, Skaven are perfect. The old Clan Eshin Night Runners with the crazy like claws and throwing stars, yeah, they're still there. The same models when I was a kid over 20 years ago, they still sell them. Rat Ogres, still sell them. Poison Wing Globadiers, still sell them. All the War Machines, still sell them. lightning cannons, everything. So Skaven are completely intact and totally buyable right now from GW, from any local store. We've seen some stock issues with Old World mods already. Think of how quickly like the Bretonnians sold out. Even the Tomb Kings, Bretonnians sold out like instantly. Tomb Kings, by the end of the day, they were pretty much all sold out as well on the launch day of Old World. But you know what wasn't sold out? Skaven. If you were someone who was hyped for the Old World launch and you were going to get back into it with your original Skaven army that you wanted to build back from when you were a kid, you could literally go over Age of Sigmar, Skaven, and put all of the units you could possibly want into your basket. No worries about stock issues whatsoever. This is what I mean. The legacy factions have no issues when it comes to model support. Okay, I won't say no issues. There are some blind spots I have to admit, and you'll have to let me know down in the comment section if I'm like wrong about this. But I think maybe Dark Elves might not have 100% everything back, although I remember they've got their Dark Shard Spears, and I'm sure they've got repeater crossbowmen and everything. So even Dark Elves are probably fine if you look under some of the free peoples of City of Sigmar stuff. So the point is that legacy factions don't need any new models, because right now their model ranges are almost universally completely available and intact. You just go over to the Sigmar side of the website. So that addresses the first point, read the models. Let's now have a look at the rules. Now the rules is a bit up and down. There's some positive, there's some negative. So on the positive side of things, you are getting your rules for free. Everyone else who has a core faction has got to buy them. And they're going to have to buy like the Forces of Fantasy or the Ravening Hordes book, or both, and then they're going to have to buy their arcane journals or their codexes on top of that. You don't need to do that. You know what you do? You get your big rule book, and you get your free PDF, and you're good to go. In fact, you don't even need to wait around for your arcane journal to come out. If you're a 40k player, right? Any 40k players will be able to attest this. How frustrating is it waiting for your codex to come up in the codex cycle? Why can't we just have all the codexes straight away? It's why when GW hard reset with like 10th with 8th edition and everyone got their indexes, everyone was super happy because they were like, yeah, everyone can finally play with rules that have all been released at the same time. And there's going to be some balance issues, of course, but we can just get them and the rules are free and we can just start playing, and it's a barrier to entry that's been removed. Some people are like, oh no, I'm not going to get a book for my faction. It's like, yeah, from a certain perspective, that's a really good thing, because you're not having to wait for your book to come around. You're not going to have to pay for your book when it comes around. And if it ever gets FAQ'd or invalidated, you're not going to feel like you've got a massive paperweight. So getting the rules as a legacy faction, there are a lot of advantages to it. There might be people like myself who are waiting for the Empire Arcane Journal to come out. And I might still be waiting for it 12, 24 months later. Depends how quickly they release these things. I think Old World's going to be a bit of a slow burner. Going to be a more methodical, more well-paced game than the constant breakneck treadmill that games like 40k often are. Think of it more, and again, I'm speaking slightly from a position of ignorance, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but think more about like Necromunda. Necromunda gets like a couple of big releases, like books and stuff, a year, and the rest of the time it's like, oh cool, we can just play for 6 months without worrying about if anything's changed. I feel like Old World's going to be the same thing. Rather than every month the meta changing, it's going to be, 3 or 4 months later, we're going to have a new Arcane Journal come out. But if you're a legacy faction, you can literally look over at those core factions with your cup of tea in hand, pinky finger stuck out, giggling ruefully to yourself, whilst someone's going, I still haven't got my legacy, I still haven't got my my Arcane Journal. And you're like, yeah, well, you know what? I don't need an Arcane Journal because all my rules are right here. And they're free. I'm not waiting eagerly to throw my hard-earned cash down on a book that might get FAQ'd into invalidity, if that's a word. Invalidity? Someone will know. Invalidity. You're like, nope, got my rules, good to go, and from day one, I'm ready to rock and cock. But it's not all sunshine and lollipops, because there are, of course, disadvantages to being given your rules and then told to go and play outside. If you are a legacy faction that gets a free PDF and it's good and the points are balanced and everything seems pretty decent and on the level, then that's great. Off you go, no issues. But if you get a legacy faction and it's massively overtuned or underpowered and it never gets addressed, that could cause some pretty serious balance issues in the game. A good example of this could be, imagine if in Warhammer 40k 10th edition Eldar came out and they never got addressed. That would be a big problem for the game, and no one would deny that, because unnerfed Eldar were just unbelievably broken. There's also the risk that over time the factions could get left behind. You know, they start off relatively balanced and in line with the others, but this is Games Workshop. There is power creep inevitably. You might find yourself in 2 years' time thinking, bloody hell, there's no point in me pulling out these vampires, no point in me pulling out these ogres. They're just going to not be able to do anything on the tabletop because I can't take on the latest and greatest. Fortunately, I don't think these are going to be big issues, and I've got 2 reasons for it. Firstly, GW will follow the money. If they see that Dark Elf kits from Age of Sigmar are flying off the shelves, they're selling them like hotcakes, they can't keep enough of them in stock, then they're going to put 2 and 2 together and go, right, we need to give these Dark Elves a arcane journal. We need to give them a book. GW will follow the money. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't want to put your fate in GW's hands, you don't want to trust them to make the right decision. I mean, they have made a bunch of stupid decisions in the past. Then another reason why I really wouldn't worry about it is community comp. This is something that old world Warhammer Fantasy players will be intimately familiar with. Back in the day, Warhammer Fantasy, especially 8th edition, wasn't super balanced. And there were some factions that were overtuned and some factions that were undertuned. And they're back in the day, everyone was a legacy faction. You basically didn't get any updates whatsoever. You got a book and that was it, kind of thing. A bit like getting a free PDF and that was it. And what the community did and what the competitive scene did, and Warhammer Fantasy, it did have a big competitive scene. You know, not as big as 40k is now, but very, very respectable competitive scene for its size, for its day. And what they had was the comp system. What this meant was that certain factions by the community were ranked as either top tier, mid tier, or low tier. I'm simplifying this, by the way. And tournaments would say, we're running a, for example, 2,000 point tournament. If you're a mid tier faction, your army list can contain 2,000 points. If you're a top tier faction, you can only bring 1,750 points. If you're a bottom tier faction, you can submit a list that's 2,250 points. And there were little variances around this, but by and large, that was the accepted system. And it wasn't like, oh, this is one tournament that's running it this way, and another tournament that's running it another way. No, like, this was just like the standard accepted format. I'm running a fancy tournament, I'm using the Swedish comp system. It was as simple as that. If you're a veteran player of 40k, it's kind of similar to what ITC did back in 8th edition. Warhammer 8th edition released, and there was lots of fun to be had, and everyone was playing all sorts of rules, but over the course of the edition, people realized that we needed to coalesce, consolidate, homogenize, and come together. And so the ITC released standard tournament missions and standard tournament terrain packs. They were some of the first people to do it. Before GW terrain maps, before UKTC, there was Frontline Gaming and the ITC, and they were the ones that came up with these variable secondaries and all the stuff that we know and love as part of sort of 9th and 10th edition 40k. This was all done in 8th edition. And what happened is the community built this system. It became the way to play the games competitively. The game itself was going in a very competitive direction. More and more people were playing it competitively. And so what GW did is they saw the system and went, oh, that's brilliant. We'll co-opt it and we'll use it when we release our next edition. And I would not be surprised if Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer Old World with these legacy factions goes through a very similar process. GW's got their focus right now on the core factions, but if the community, and we know that Games Workshop pushes tournament play now, they realize they are a game company, not a model company. And that's why 40k has got constant balance patches and constant updates. You know, it's very much leaning into being a T-sport, you know, tabletop e-sport, all that kind of stuff. And fantasy will have the same thing. If Old World becomes big, which I firmly believe it will do, it's sold beyond anyone's expectations. If fantasy will go through the same process, the same evolution. It'll launch, everyone will start playing it, everyone will just go mad, they'll be collecting everything that they want to, and then it'll start homogenizing, and then it'll start coming together, and these formats will be created and adapted and adopted as the standard way to play in the game. And when GW sees this, they'll co-opt it. I wouldn't be surprised. I might be getting ahead of myself now. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Old World 2.0, a lot of stuff that the community comes up with gets brought into the main game, just like we have seen them do in Sigmar, and just like we've seen them do in 40k. We're just at the beginning of the gestation process. But speaking of tournaments, this brings me on to the last part of the big bullshit GW statement, which is that these armies would not be tournament legal. And in my opinion, this caused the most uproar, the most consternation, the most upset, because the implication was that these armies weren't allowed to be played. Sure, here's your rules. Good luck, sucker. No one's going to want to play with you. Your army's not tournament legal. And honestly, that is just so far from the truth. What Games Workshop means with this is that you won't be able to use legacy factions in their official Games Workshop tournaments. Let me tell you, as someone who has been playing competitively for over a decade, I can count on one hand and still have quite a few fingers left over how many official GW tournaments I've been to. They only host them in places like Warhammer World, and in the UK at least, I've spoken to store managers there. They've been told they're not allowed to run like tournaments and stuff inside the stores. Like at best they can run like maybe a bit of a league or like a narrative thing, but that's it. Games Workshop doesn't really do many events. When you see things like Nova and Adepticon and LVO, those aren't official Games Workshop events. Those are independent events that might work with Games Workshop. GW might use them as an opportunity to preview some new thing and get the hype train rolling, but these are independent. And so the vast majority of tournaments that you are going to encounter personally, either at your local friendly gaming store or if you go to a big convention, are going to have no issue with you running a legacy tournament. I believe for all the tournament organizers I know that are interested in doing fantasy, every single one of them has said, yeah, we're going to allow legacy factions. Of course we are. It's not a problem. Not a problem at all. Legacy factions, no issues. Because tournament organizers, here's the thing, that they're not going to shut out potential ticket sellers, ticket buyers, I should say. Bums on seat, laddies. It's all about getting the punters in. If you're a TO, you're not going to take just under 50% of the factions for a game and go, you can't turn up. No. You're going to be like, yeah, of course you can play. I need to sell tickets. I need to make sure that I'm filling this event out. You're not going to say to Skaven or Vampire Council or any other legacy faction, you can't turn up, especially when some of them are really popular with really, really dedicated followings. No, of course not. You'd be mad to do so. Little shout out, by the way, here. For those that don't know, there is a podcast called the Square Base Podcast, and it's run by Rob and Val, and it's my go-to place for old world content. And Rob is actually a tournament organizer. He's run loads and loads of events. I've actually been to one of his events as well, and he said straight away, as a TO, I'm going to allow legacy factions. No ifs, ands, or buts. Not a problem whatsoever. He said if there's any issues regarding the power of these factions, whether it's up or down, it's not going to be a problem. I've got a lot of experience writing tournament packs, and he was there. He actually was there at the beginning of Age of Sigmar when the game launched with no points. He was, he was heavily part of, or at least heavily aware of, or was, included in some capacity, the whole like building points for the game and using those points. Because remember, HMR lost no points whatsoever. The community had to come up with them, and then GW basically, like we said, they took that on board. And so he's like, I've got loads of experience writing tournament packs. It will not be an issue when it comes to legacy factions. We're going to take them at face value if we can. If they need a bit of tweaking, we'll do that. And I'll write tournament packs. And his whole thing right now, because he really wants Old World to be a success, he's like, I'm focused right now on writing easy to use tournament packs so that any TOs around there can freely just take them and just use them. He says, I'm just giving this out to the community. Him and Val are just doing this. And this is an example of what we were saying before about the community will provide, and it will become very standardized. You won't have one community using one set, one community using another. Like, all it takes is one person to take the initiative, run with it, grab the ball, run with it, and go, I'm going to pick up this issue, and I'm going to come up with a solution with it. And then most people just go along with that. That's what happened with ITC. Frontline Gaming just came along and went, yeah, we're going to fix some of the competitive side of 40k. And then they did, and it was great. And everyone just went along with it because they were like, yeah, this is good enough, this will work. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be like good enough for most people to be like, yeah, that'll do. So legacy factions not being out of tournaments is total bullshit. No independent TO worth their salt is going to bar any potential ticket buyers. And we've also, and I'm getting this from like third-hand knowledge, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the biggies, I can't remember if it's like LVO or Depthcon or Nova, but one of the biggies, if you know, let me know down in the comment section, has said, yeah, all legacy factions will be allowed at our big events that we're going to be running for Old World. No issues, no problems. So if you're someone out there who's thinking, oh, I won't be able to get games if I collect legacy faction, nah, not a problem. You will do. And if you, and in all honesty, like if we can just be real for a moment, if you go into a game club and there's someone there and they refuse to play you because you've got a legacy faction and they're like, well, actually that's a legacy faction, so it's not legal for tournament play and I only play tournaments. Yeah, that's the kind of person you don't want to play with anyway. You don't want to subject yourself to their company for several hours. And that's not trying to like shit anyone, that's just the reality of it. Those kinds of people are not going to be the kind of people you're going to want to interact with. You want to turn up to a gaming hobby, a gaming space, win or lose, close game or far game. You want to turn up and be able to throw your minis down and have a good time with them. And that's the kind of people that we want to be encouraging in the hobby. And that's the kind of vibe that I think Old World's going to have. But Mordian, I hear you cry. What about Warhammer 40k and Legends? It is true that there are units and data sheets that in Warhammer 40k get put to the wayside, they fall down, they go to Legends, and they no longer are used in tournaments. And the generally accepted practice that things in Legends are not okay for tournaments, and people kind of just sort of go with that. But there's a big difference between where 40k is right now and where Old World is. So 40k has been progressing pretty much uninterrupted for decades now, and it's really picked up momentum in the last, well, sort of 3 editions or so, between 8th, 9th and 10th, right? And over the course of the last 7 or 8 years, there's been a lot of models that have been produced, one-off things that have come about, and so the game has ballooned, has bloated somewhat. This is a great example of this. Is you've got about 5-6 different kinds of basic troop choice for the Space Marines. You've got tactical Marines, and then you've got intercessors like infiltrators and incursors, and then you get over to some of the Space War ones. You've got like Grey Hunters, and there's like 5 or 6 different just basic troop choice that all really do the same thing. They're Marines with bolters with a few little tweaks on them, and so because the game has bloated up to this point, what GW, because 40k has got to that point now, as the game marches on, things start getting replaced. So we don't, we have sort of field ordnance batteries rather than like heavy mortars and thud guns now in the Guard, for example. So Games Workshop makes a datasheet for Legends for those models that they're no longer going to produce, but they also have replaced that unit with something else. They've trimmed 2 datasheets down to 1 datasheet, which is Field Ordnance Battery. The point is that Games Workshop with 40k isn't just cutting things. Often things do just get cut, things just fall to the wayside, that is true. But it's because the game is bloated. It's because the game has been around a long time, and so there is room, there is fat that needs to be cut. There's things that need to be trimmed off. With Old World, the game is starting from the beginning. It's a new thing. It's a whole thing that's being launched. And whilst there is some echoes from the past with Warhammer Fantasy and stuff, by and large, this is a new game. It's the old game return, but it's a new game in terms of where it's at in its lifespan. And so things aren't going to start getting cuts and legends and all that kind of stuff. Not for a while. Let the game blow up. Let GW come out with all sorts of crazy things and model kits. Let them go through that process as they always do. And then things will start getting cut out. But right now, because the game is at its beginning, it's at its inception, the difference between Legacy and Legends is very distinct. Because Legacy and Legends are not the same thing. Legacy are factions that right now aren't getting the attention. Legends is where GW is trimming away the fat. And the difference is that Games Workshop, once they put something into Legends, it's unlikely they're going to start like producing that model again apart from made to order. With Legacy, the world is their oyster. Okay? As we said before, GW will follow the money. If they see that old ass Dark Elf Spearmen, old ass fucking Skaven models are flying off the shelves, they will release new kits for them. Legacy has the chance to be reborn. I see Legacy as a place of opportunity, whereas Legends is a place where things go to die. And I think that's a very, very important distinction. And maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, but I think that the whole issue with like not being allowed to use your models, all that kind of stuff, that's just bollocks, that's just bullshit. And the community is saying that from the beginning. It's another important point to make. The general accepted practice in 40k is Legends no bueno. That's what the general community practice is. From the beginning, the old world community, everyone that's come together, everyone that's getting into this thing, old players returning, new players coming along, getting swept up in the tidal wave of positive hype. Everyone from the beginning is making the message loud and clear. Legacy is fine. It's the opposite message to Legends. The community in 40 cases, Legends, no. The community in Old World is saying Legacy, yes, God yes. In summary, the controversy around Old World and Legacy factions is a nothing burger. It's not a thing. You are going to have all the models you could possibly want. You are going to have all the rules for free. You're going to have an advantage. You're going to have free rules when everyone else is going to have to pay for theirs. And don't worry about getting left behind, because I guarantee you there will be leaders in this community who are going to step up and come up with community comp to make sure that any Legacy faction that might be overtuned or undertuned can still play with the rest of us. And the community has said in one resounding voice, we want Legacy factions to be part of our ecosystem. And you know what? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. Because it's easy for me to talk about this. I'm going to put money where my mouth is. It is my intention to get a full Clan Eshin Skaven army. When I was a kid, when I was growing up playing Warhammer, I had Orcs and Gobbos, and one of my best friends had Skaven, and he had Clan Eshin. And I always used to love his models, and I coveted his old Skaven army greatly. And so you know what? I'm going to get myself that childhood army. Because remember, for me, Old World, I'm feasting on the member berries. And so I'm going to get myself a Legacy Skaven Clan Eshin Assassin army. And also, this is Morning Glory, home of the Horde. You're telling me that I'm not going to be able to use a Vampire Count's Zombie Horde army? Come on! I'm getting the Zombie Horde. And woe betide anyone that says I won't be able to use it. But as always, this is all just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I would love to know what factions you guys are interested in, whether it's core or legacy. And I'd love to know what kind of armies you're looking at. What I mean by that is, if you're going down like a Lizardman route, are you gonna go pure skink? Or are you gonna go pure source or have like a little mix? Or if you're looking at a core faction, you're going for like Wood Elf pure Glade Guard or pure Tree Man, or Dwarf or Empire Gunline. I'm just really excited about Old right now, and I'd love to know what kind of factions people are getting themselves hyped up for. Don't forget to smash that like button if you have enjoyed this, and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, and they have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a big shout out to Bon Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys so much. Your incredible generosity is a massive part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time, and it is a big driving force behind the channel. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.